Young men came from hunting, faint and weary. What is that, my lord, my dearie? Oh, brother dear, let my bed be.
Exactly 10,000 bodies came to be under the guidance of the fire bearer, led there by 10 warriors, strong men, men of valor, warriors of Yah. These are the 10 warriors who led the children through violent situations and hostile territories. 1,000 bodies have been led by the bowman, who can cause a single arrow to pierce the heart of 50 men. He's guarded by a fierce bird so large that its powerful wings, when opened, expand the length of a man. Many have witnessed the destruction it can cause with one swipe of its deadly claws or one peck from its mighty beak. It can cause almost as much damage as its master's bow. 1,000 bodies had been led by the fighter, whose wife is the tea maker. It was she who dreamed that the white-haired warrior would come, to be followed shortly after by the wrath of hell. 1,000 bodies had been led by the swordsman, who fights with a blade that had been made in the forge of Levi Law, the swordsmith. 1,000 by the drummer, who now sat on top of the hill. 1,000 by the scholar and his son, who carried 2 shofars made of pure silver ingrained with gold, unlike any gold that had ever been seen by any amongst them. 1,000 bodies traveled with the gutter king, who fights with 2 blades that were also made in the forge of Levi, the swordsman. The gutter king is guarded by a fierce black tiger with a violent temper. 1,000 came with the man named Noah, whose wife is the seamstress. They travel with a sewing machine that can sew clothes that never rot or fall victim to the moth. 1,000 travel with the soldier, whose wife is Gabby. 1,000 traveled with the huntsman, whose wife is Sephora the soother. So precious is she, that she is not only guarded by the huntsman, but also by a fierce white lioness. And 1,000 bodies awaited them at Seminole territory, under the protection of the fire bearer, whose wife is the earth crier. The 10 powerful warriors protected the people there at Seminole territory until a massive earthquake caused the walls to fall, and they knew it was time to resume their journey east to meet the white-haired warrior who will lead them all. When he first stepped foot into the makeshift camp that stretched out about a mile, word spread about him like fire on dry kindling. Those who were close by came out of their tents to see him with their own eyes, not believing he could actually look like the tea maker described. A young man with the warrior's body, but whose long hair and beard was as white as snow. What a sight he made walking amongst them. Not only was his braided hair and beard snow white, but so were the irises of his eyes, and the long leather duster draped over his massive shoulders. As he walked, the wind caused it to bellow open to reveal the pearl handles of the 2 pistols underneath his arm he wore in a shoulder holster, and the sword at his side, who too had a pearl handle. Trotting along with him was a pack of white wolves that watched their every movement. The man looked at each of them, and it seemed as if his strange gaze could see straight through their souls. There was no mistaking. This was the warrior they had all been waiting for. Which meant, now that he was here, the wrath of hell was soon to follow. When word got to the camps of the 9 warriors, they prepared their people. They had all traveled through perilous times, and they knew what to do. Quickly, the women, children, and the elderly packed up their tents and their supplies, while the able-bodied men amongst them gathered their weapons, at the same time finding a place for their women and children to take cover until they told them it was safe for them to come out. The warriors knew what to do, because their 10 leaders constantly trained them, only allowing them rest in the evenings and on the Shabbats. The camp stretched out for about a mile, so when word spread that the white-haired warrior was there, the leader of each 1,000 made his way to meet with the fire bearer, just like they'd all agreed. They didn't know how long they had before the attack the tea maker had dreamed of came, but they needed to touch bases with Monroe and see what he would have them to do. Because their camp was so big, the fire bearer said that the meet would take place toward the middle of it, which so happened to be where the hill was, that the earth crier and the other so real individuals sat in some kind of trance.
"Do you mean you've been waiting for me?" I muttered, eyeballing the man who called himself Melek Black. I'd never seen anything like him. Fire ran through his veins. My gaze went to the big black cat that walked alongside his master, and he too was made of pure fire, Yah's fire. The tea maker dreamed of you. She said that a warrior whose hair is the color of fresh fallen snow would come, and that he would lead us, he and the brown-haired warrior. His words stunned me. I eased down in a squatting position at the base of the hill. Daweed? My gaze went back to Melek. Brown-haired warrior. Did she say anything else about him? He thought for a moment before shaking his head. Not much, only that he would have a brown leather duster, the color of his hair, much like yourself. It took me a moment to process that information. Daweed was alive. What did that mean? Would he still be gunning to kill me? Before I could think further on the matter, the loud, piercing cry of an eagle filled the air. I looked up just as the biggest bird I'd ever seen swooped low over our heads. This was no bird. Coming to my feet, I studied its genetic makeup. Like Abir and Wolf, this was no animal, but a Melek. My gaze went to the trees around us, looking past the flesh, just as a man who wore a dark shawl with a hood so big it cast his face in shadow materialized like smoke from the trees. On his back, he carried a bow. Although he wasn't close enough for my fleshy eyes to see the bow, my spiritual ones saw that it was made of the same material of the Earth Crier's violin and the warrior that sat next to her drum. I travel with 10,000 bodies. Melek began to the right of me, led by 11 men. Me, you know. He gestured toward the man coming from the trees. Abraham Maximus, the bowman. I've witnessed him down 50 men with one arrow. The man approached us, removing his hood. He looked to be about Melek's age, maybe younger. He held out his hand. "Shalom, Aki," he grumbled. I clasped his hand, pulling him into a brotherly embrace. "Shalom, Ak." Abraham leads 1,000 bodies, amongst them 429 warriors. I nodded, impressed. Melek gestured to 2 more men coming from the trees, one of which I recognized instantly. "Noah!" I cried out, embracing him. He's Big Akla, the brother. He and his Isha used to come by the lion's den sometime. His big brother, my dad and Lion, always teased him for not coming on in and allowing them to officially train him. instead of always sitting on the sideline talking smack about what he could do if he put his mind to it. Damn, those were the good days, filled with laughter and love. Who knew they would come to a sudden end? Shalom, little brother, his booming voice echoed in the clearing. Man, it's good to see you. When Hedda's Isha dreamed of a white-haired warrior coming here to meet us, something in my spirit told me it was you. Ak, have you seen my father and mother? I asked. He was the only person outside of Ty and Gina who'd I've seen who would know. His eyes became sorrowful, and my heart dropped. Please, Jai, don't let him tell me they're dead. Please. He shook his head. The last time I saw them had been about 6 months before the flare hit. They'd left Chicago to go back to the DR to clear up a misunderstanding between two neighboring border lords. That was the last I heard of them. I exhaled. Oh, thank you. That I can deal with. That meant it was a chance that they were still alive. My gaze went to the man that stood next to Noah. Monroe, this is hard here. He too was trained by your father and Lion at the Lion's Den. Hey, Shalom, Aki. I clasped hands with the man, embracing him. But it was something about him that looked familiar. Do I know you? I asked. Noah chuckled. He was one of your favorite boxers when you were younger. I grinned. What? The hard hitter from the shot? Hedda chuckled, nodded. I clasped hands with him again. Man, you are my all-time favorite boxer. Me and Dawid caught all your fights. It's an honor to meet you. He shook his head. No, little brother. The honor is all mine. You and Dawid are legends, man. That threw me. Me and Dawid have been fools. I frowned. For what? I asked, truly confused. Were we legends or fools? Hedda looked at me as if I had gone mad. For what? Before he could open his mouth and explain, Malek cut in. Both Noah and Hedda traveled from Chicago on different paths, meeting at Seminole Territory about a year ago. They each came with 1,000 bodies apiece. Amongst the two of them, they have 750 soldiers. As much as I would love for us to catch up, Akeem, we have to keep this moving. His gaze fell on me. You don't know this, but the team makers saw that shortly after your arrival, we would be attacked by the wrath of hell. He put his hand to his chest and grinned a bit. We fought a lot of battles since the flare, and hell, even before the flare. Some of them very deadly. But I don't think I've ever fought one that could be described as the wrath of hell. That sounds pretty serious to me. And if the team maker dreamed it will come to pass. I studied him for a moment. He didn't take me for a man that was given into over-exaggeration. If he was concerned about this coming battle, then I would respect that. He had no way of knowing I've been fighting battles my whole life. There wasn't one that I feared. I've been born to war. But instead of going into all of that with him, I just nodded. No worries, carry on. He gestured toward the hill. Seth, the drummer, showed up at Seminole Territory with 1,000 bodies shortly after Noah and Hedda, amongst them 467 warriors. What's the deal with his drum? I asked, studying the wood. Like the preacher, it shined pure light. I could barely make it out. Malek shrugged a bit. Man, like my wife's violin. And this ox bow, he said, placing his hand on the bowman's shoulders. It's complicated. I've never heard him play his drum, but the people he led here heard him play it once. And they said they'd come under attack somewhere in Indiana by a group of blood fiends. Their leader, realizing that they were outnumbered, instead of picking up his sword, grabbed his drum and began to play. They spoke about his eyes when he played, said they were the purest white. His pupils had disappeared. As he beat that drum, they say the ground began to violently shake, and although they couldn't see it, they could feel spirits whipping past them to destroy the blood fiends. They said he'd used a drum to call an army that they could not see. He shook his head, throwing up his hand. That's all I got. I grunted, nodding. However, he continued, the fact that I woke up yesterday morning to see them all up there like that may mean we're getting ready to see just what it can do. He nodded toward me. What about your wife? She's the only one up there without an instrument. What's her deal? My gaze fell on my beautiful Tyler. My beautiful baby that didn't know how sorry I was for her to hurt. All she wanted was the kind of love her parents had. And I denied her that. But no more. If I survive this battle, I will do all that I can to make sure she has a smile on her face every day. I studied the light pulsating throughout her body. The light was coming from the tune of the violin. I'd never seen anything like this. It reminded me of how Ty said her music notes on her wall came to life for her every morning. The light was not only changing her, but also our unborn son. It circulated through his tiny veins. She has a voice that can make angels weep. Like the drummer, it chases away demons. I shook my head. It caused the blind man to see. Malek nodded, thinking over my words. Okay, so she's vocals. Got it. I've been trying to figure out what's going on with them. I've seen my wife go into these trances before when she plays her violin, but I've never seen her pull others into it with her. Well, I take that back. She pulled me in once. I nodded toward the older man and the younger one with the golden shofars. Who are the fellas with the golden horns? His gaze traveled up the hill to the pair. The professor and his son. Before the flare hit, the professor specialized in the study of genealogy. He worked for a special branch of the government, following the lineage of great King Dawid. As a matter of fact, he worked closely with that doctor fellow, I forgot his name. You know, the one that came forth before the flare hit and publicly announced to the world the truth about our identity, throwing everything into madness. He looked at me as if I remembered the big event. I shook my head. I wasn't around, but I heard about it when I resurfaced. Hitter frowned. Resurfaced? Damn, Bo. You must have been in a sunken place not to have seen what happened when the world found out who we were. I chuckled. Sometimes it felt like it. I can tell by the look on all four warriors' faces. They wanted to ask what happened to me. Where had I gone when I disappeared? They exchanged looks with each other as if to see which one of them would be bold enough to ask right out. It looked like Noah had won. Cleared his throat. So about that, when you and Dawid disappeared, it shook everybody up, trying to figure out the dynamics of that. Where exactly, before he could get another word out, a fierce black tiger prowled out of the trees toward us. I studied his genetic makeup and saw that he was like Abir, but unlike Abir, he was not a friendly spirit. Not to say he was evil, but it definitely wasn't friendly. Abir and my other wolves hunched low at my feet and began to growl at it. I reached for the handle of my sword, but the bowman steeled my hand. It's the pet of the Gutter King. He's a mean bastard, but fairly safe, as long as you don't upset the king. Upset the king, my ass, Hitter muttered. As a smiling young man exited the trees behind the big cat, I could tell right off the master and the pet had two entirely different dispositions. The Gutter King was a charmer, but there was something about his smile that looked so familiar. It was a smile that hid extreme pain. I would recognize that smile anywhere. The king was built and carried himself like a fighter. There was no doubt about that. He carried two blades, one in a holster on each side of his waist. However, when Hard Hitter saw the king, A growl left his throat. Unlike everyone else who watched the young warrior approach, his face said he was not impressed, not even a little bit. Obviously, he was not one of his favorite people. And y'all know me, I had to know why. "What's the matter?" I asked him. "You don't like the king?" Head grunted. "Let's put it like this. If he wasn't my niece's Jesse husband, I would knock his cocky ass out. That punk is a damn lunatic." Noah and the bowman nodded their heads in agreement. "Yeah, the kid ain't right upstairs," the bowman muttered. I grinned. Somehow this situation feeling like deja vu. And old Hitter here was reminding me a lot of my father-in-law. I remember when they all said that about me. It wasn't that I wasn't right in the head. It was just that they couldn't understand me. Hell, I was misunderstood. And I bet they all do the same to this young brother. So, I asked him, not able to help rubbing it in just a bit. "He's your nephew." His angry gaze came to mine. "He's crazy as hell, that's what he is." He used his thumb to point to Noah. Jess was supposed to marry his son, Yermi, a good boy with a good upbringing. He tapped his head in a sane brain. He nodded toward the approaching warrior. "Not this damn maniac." There was real disdain on his face. He did not like his niece's husband. And I couldn't help but think, what are the odds? Malek shook his head, chuckling. "Monroe, may I introduce you to Amir, the Gutter King," he said when the kid finally made his way to us. "He managed to lead the resistance against the grid. Somehow, he and his band of thieves defeated it and was responsible for its collapse, making him officially America's most wanted." I looked at the young man impressed. He could be no more than 25 or 26. "Is that so?" I asked him. Although I wasn't around when they implemented the grid shortly after the flare hit, I heard about it and that it was a very tough time for the people. Some say it had been set up to protect the very rich, while others say machines were going around snatching people off the streets where they became food for the wealthy. Yeah, it is. And before we left New York a few years ago, I saw blueprints for its relaunch. He shook his head, as for the first time since coming into the clearing, the smile left his face. "It will be 100 times more deadly than it had been before. They're selling it to the survivors by saying it will be the answer to reestablishing the world to its former glory. And when I say former, I mean way back, before the flare and even the flood. They're calling it the return of Atlantis. A world free of blood fiends, disease, hunger, war, poverty. But this time, people will have to be tagged like cattle so the system could identify them. If it picks up a human heartbeat without a tag, it's been designed to eliminate said heartbeat." I put my hand on the kid's shoulders, not liking the fact that his smile had been replaced with worry. "Instead of worrying about what has to come to pass, little brother, pray that you're found worthy of escaping. Pray that we all are." He studied me for a moment before nodding, the grin returning to his face. "I will, Ak. Now, why do they call you the Gutter King?" I asked, not able to help myself. As if he could sense what I was doing, his cheerful gaze went to his uncle-in-law, where he blinked at him with fake innocence. Oh yeah, I was gonna like this kid. He and I had a kindred spirit. Go figure. He was aware Hedda didn't like him, but like me, he didn't give a damn. The giant growled at him, and the kid winked as if to say, "Any day, big guy." Although he was not big as Hedda, Amir was no small fries and carried himself in a way that said he could hold his own should the two ever come to blows. The other warriors standing with us chuckled at their exchange. Apparently, this dynamic between the two wasn't new to everybody. The Gutter King gaze came back to me before his grin grew. "The reason they call me the Gutter King is because me and my people lived for nearly 3 years in an underground city in New York, eating good on the higher-ups' dime. We took over the same nest of bastards that kidnapped me and imprisoned me as a kid. The elites searched high and low for us to try and stop us from hacking their grid. They had no idea we were right there underneath their noses the whole time. He winked at me and I threw back my head and laughed. Oh yeah, I was going to enjoy this fella. Who in the hell was crazy enough to take over one of the fallen's nests and set up his people? I'm sure that's the story I was going to want to hear a little later. Amir led 1,000 bodies to Seminole territory, amongst them 750 fighting women, men, and children, Malek added. My startled gaze went back to His Majesty. He still wore his grin that I'm sure he was famous for. Yeah, I trained all who could hold a weapon. That was the only way we were able to make it out of New York alive. His gaze went back to Hitters. My toughest warrior and right arm is my wife Jessie, who I trained personally. Please, chump, Hitters sneered. I trained Jessie. When you met her, she knew how to throw them things. Get over yourself. Remember, 50 of them bodies you led to Seminole territory, my Jessie was already leading when she met your skinny ass, and you stole her. The smile left the Gutter King's face. Skinny? Really? I couldn't help but chuckle. You would think he would have a problem with the fact that his uncle-in-law just accused him of stealing his niece. Nah, my man took offense to being called skinny. Have I told y'all yet how much I like this kid? Amir held up his arm, making a very impressive muscle. I'm built like a tank, dude. Can't no skinny brother handle Jessie wild ass. Hitter closed the gap between him and Amir. The tiger let out a low growl, crouching low, ready to pounce. Watch what you say about my niece, Hitter growled. Amir did not back down, not even an inch. The muscle ticked in his jaw. I can say what I want to say about my wife. My wife, player. Mine. And it don't matter if you don't accept that, cause you think I stole her. You don't know what happened, because you lost her. It was me that found her, not your precious Yermiah. His gaze went to Noah. No offense, None taken, little brother, Noah replied, thoroughly enjoying the comedic drama between the two warriors like the rest of us. So remember, Unc, it's because of me that you were able to see your niece again. Another deadly growl came from the ground. I looked down surprised. The tiger was getting ready to attack. Right when his muscles began to move in a spring, Amir made a signal with his finger that seemed to calm the animal, but only a little. Hitter grinned. Yeah, you better get that pussy. He tried. Ain't you gonna have a new fur coat? Skin of tiger? That pissed Amir off, and he took the final step, closing the gap between them. Although rage blazed his gaze, that smile appeared back on his face. And to the surprise of us all, he began to sing. It was horrible and extremely off-tunable, but he looked Hitter dead in the eyes and belted out. Everyone hides their faces behind the mask they wear. And then what happened next happened so fast it took us all a minute to realize it and jump into action. After the young warrior sang his tune, he kissed the giant loudly on the cheek. Hitter's eyes blazed red before he swung a haymaker that, if it would have connected, would have taken the kid's life, or at the very least laid him low for a few hours. But Amir's skill was revealed, because not only did he duck quick enough to avoid the deadly blow, but in the same swoop he threw his weight against his animal that sprung for Hitter's throat, taking the big cat to the ground, where he had to use his whole body weight to try and get him from going after his wife's uncle. Oh my goodness, what chaos. I loved it. Malek was quicker than all of us. He threw himself at the giant before Hitta could spring after the youth and continue to pound him. But Malek's weight did little to stop him. We all had to grab a hold of him. "You gonna keep playing with me, and you gonna get hurt, boy," Hitta growled. But Amir didn't seem worried at all. He lay on top of his growling and hissing animal, stroking his coat lovingly. "Don't worry, my precious kitty. Uncle loves us. He will never hurt us." Okay. Retake. "Don't worry, my precious kitty. Uncle loves us. He will never hurt us." Oh, goodness. Woo, that boy a fool. Okay. Alright. But Amir didn't seem worried at all. He lay on top of his growling and hissing animal, stroking his coat lovingly. "Don't worry, my precious kitty. Uncle loves us. He will never hurt us." I threw my head back and roared with laughter. This was a wild boy, and I loved it. Wow, what did we miss? Did Hitta finally down the king? I looked up to see two men coming from the trees. Hitta snatched away from us, still giving Amir the evil eye. Amir carefully stood, rubbing the cat that, although wasn't hunched low, still growled at Hitta. When his gaze rose to his uncle-in-law, he blinked innocently at him. "Don't worry, uncle, I forgive you." Grinding down on his teeth, Hitta pointed at him. "You sick in the head. There's something wrong with you. I don't know what my niece seen." Amir's grin turned into a chuckle as he rubbed his hand down the front of his leather vest. "Well, I'll tell you what she sees in me. You see, nobody makes her feel better than the Gutter King. She especially loves when I Okay, Malek said over him, bringing whatever the maniac was about to say to a halt before complete chaos erupted again. "Monroe, allow me to introduce you to Emmanuel, called the Huntsman, and Marcus, called the Soldier." Malek continued, holding out his hand, gesturing to the two men that had joined us, who was now looking between Hitta and the Gutter King, trying to see what they'd missed. Both of these Akeem showed up together as similar territory with 2,000 bodies, amongst them 834 warriors. I clasped hands with both Akeem. "Shalom." "Hey, Shalom," they responded. The one called the Huntsman had the same disposition as the Black Tiger. He wasn't all that friendly. And Marcus, although he seemed approachable, bore the signs of a soldier who'd fought too many wars. It was he who asked if they'd missed Hitta laying out Amir. Something moved out the corner of my eye. I looked up just as a beautiful white lioness leapt from a high branch to the ground below. She circled our small group, taking me in. Yeah, it was Malek. "Amber, my wife Sephora's pet," the Huntsman muttered. "She normally won't leave Sephora's side, but she had to come see you with her own eyes. I must have passed her inspection, because she walked to my side and rubbed her big body against my leg until I reached down and scratched behind her ears. When she was satisfied, she disappeared as silently and as quickly as she came. I looked up to ask Malek if that was all. Before I could, the sound of a motorcycle filled the air. Moments later, a figure riding a black Ducati-powered motorcycle rode into the clearing. He stood from the bike, removing his helmet. Dressed in all black, what stood out about this fellow was the magnificent sword on his waist. As he walked toward us, he put me in the mind of a samurai. Last, but certainly not least, May I introduce you to my little cousin and right arm, Bruce. But we all call him the swordsman, Malek said, grinning at his cousin as he approached. Hey, Shalom, cuz. The man who looked to be a few years younger than me said before he clasped hands with Malek, who pulled him into a brotherly hug. These two looked so much alike, I would have thought them to be father and son, had Malek not said this was his cousin. When the flare hit, Bruce was all the way in Vegas overseeing the building of a new hotel. It took him 6 years, but he eventually showed back up to similar territory with 1,000 bodies, 4 of which was his wife and 3 children. As Malek spoke, you could see the pride he felt for the younger man in his gaze. Bruce chuckled, shaking his head. Man, if not for you, none of it would have been possible. I can't take the credit. I nodded like his answer. Shalom, little brother. Hey, Shalom, Pop, he said as we clasped hands. After I'd been introduced to everyone, they told me about the tea maker and her dreams. She's his wife, and it had been her dreams that had led them to this point. They were all expecting me, because she told them that I was coming and that I would be their leader. I don't know how I felt about that. I was not my father or Lion, or even Daweed for that matter. Those men were leaders. I had spent most of my life screwing up. I was not strong like them. I tried to tell this small band of warriors that I just come for my wife, and if they liked, they could head back with us to Goshen, which was the name the people had started calling the compound that upheld us. There wasn't much space left behind the walls, but what good did walls do when it was Yah's will for them to be trodden down? Malek agreed that they would all head back with us, and that they would just set a perimeter around it. The judge was going to be thrilled with this information, poor bastard. The people were already running him ragged, and here I came with 10,000 more. I didn't envy his job. However, I told them I couldn't go anywhere until whatever was going on with Ty was complete. Malek said he didn't dare touch or interrupt his wife when she fell into these trances. He spoke of the light that sometimes came from her eyes, and how it was something whose bad side he didn't want to be on. Wise man. However, we need to get these people moving towards Goshen, I told him. If something is headed our way, the closest we get to the other warriors, the better. Begin to break up the camps one at a time. Tell your people to keep to the shadows, and be ready to lay low should the threat come. I need them to move steadily, but steadily. Preferably, what's going on with your wife and mine won't be much longer. Malek nodded, and he and the other 6 warriors headed into the trees to begin to disperse the people, one camp at a time. Bruce disappeared on his bike. After sending the wolves off to hunt, I built a small fire at the base of the hill and sat where I could keep an eye on Ty. Dog had not joined the other wolves in seeking a meal. She was worried about Ty. I rubbed her fur. Who knew when I sent her off to make sure my heart made it to me safe, she was going to fall in love and become attached to my wife. Thank you for keeping her safe for me. She butted my head with hers, nearly knocking me over, before sitting on her hind legs on the ground next to Abir. The warriors had trained their people well. Although hundreds of bodies carefully filed past me, I could barely tell. Like I suggested, they stuck to the shadows and barely made a ruffle in the forest. About an hour later, I looked up surprised to see all 8 warriors walking towards me. What are y'all doing? I thought you were heading toward Goshen with your families. We're not gonna leave you here to fight alone, Amir said, squatting down next to me, holding his hand over the fire. Yeah, we figured the 9 of us can hold off the enemy while our soldiers get the people out of here. They have their instructions. They will guard the people with their lives. I smiled at Malek, who said, you think 9 of us can hold off the wrath of hell? As soon as I asked that question, the eagle flew over our head and let out a loud cry of warning. My gaze shot up, just as the first wave of dark beams flew across the sun. I stood. "Prepare yourselves for battle," I told them. "I guess we're getting ready to find out," the Gutter King muttered, answering my question from a moment ago, as he withdrew two magnificent knives from his sheaths, one in each hand. As with any war, the battle is first fought on the spiritual before it takes place on the physical. I looked up and watched as spirits of light, who had the same faces as the people of this camp, and the spirits of darkness roared in the heavens. This part always amazed me. Blinking, my gaze came back to the ground, where the people ran and took cover. The soldiers that had been trained well by the 11 warriors, 8 of which stood with me, positioned themselves to protect them. And the 8 warriors that stood with me prepared themselves to do what they were created to do: destroy. My gaze went back to the heavens as I watched the battle unfold. Not one of the 10,000 bodies on this piece of earth knew that their heavenly representations was engaged in a deadly battle for their very lives. I saw some fall in the heavens, and I knew that the fleshly bodies would not make it past this battle. But I saw more of the enemy fall. In the end, it was the spirits of light that took the battle. I exhaled as I opened my arms, letting my coat fall off my shoulders before drawing my sword. I don't know how many of us will be left standing, but I know that in the end, light will win. And that was good enough for me. If this was the day that I died, then I would go down protecting my wife and unborn child. "Warriors," I told the 8 bodies surrounding me, "Yah has given us the battle. All we need to do is claim it." Twin fires burst to life in Melek's eyes as he pulled his sword. A second later, the sword burst into flames. Hitta rotated his neck, loosening his shoulders as he wrapped chains around his fists. The bowman took off at a high speed, and as stealth as a leopard climbed a tree overlooking the clearing, positioning himself on a high branch. The eagle, who I heard him call Vengeance, swooped through the air, watching the last of the enemy fall on the spirit plane. I made eye contact with each one of these men who stood to fight with me today, and never had I ever been so proud of the work of Yahuwah. The first wave came in the bodies of blood fiends. More fiends than I'd ever seen in one place spilled from the trees. Only, they no longer moved in slow zombie-like fashion. Their bodies had become homes to legions of demons that were far faster than that of the average human man and 20 times stronger. Crouched low, I prepared myself to fight. But then something amazing happened. The one black called the drummer suddenly opened his eyes, filling the darkening forest with a bright light that washed over us. As he looked our way without seeing, the others on the hill still stood with their eyes closed, swaying to the gentle tune of the violin that was soon to be drowned out by the pounding of the drum. The warrior's scarred hands pounded out a beat that was not of this world. My father had the best drummers on the island living at the armory, and even they could not play like this. The unearthly beat vibrated through the ground and up through the soles of our feet. And then I saw it. I saw what the drum could do. 5 impressive heavenly warriors wearing golden armor descended from above and landed on Hitta, Noah, Bruce, Marcus, and Emmanuel, the huntsman. Neither of them knew what had just happened to them, but the way that they rotated their necks and shoulders showed that they now felt stronger. The drummer's gaze landed on me as he viciously beat on the drum made of that very special wood. Abner, the grouchy black tiger, and the eagle whose master I heard call Vengeance, disappeared in the trees before 4 spirits wearing gold armor emerged. As Abir came toward me, I saw that he and I had the same face. I sucked in my breath as we became one, feeling more alive than I've ever felt. What's happening, Abir? I asked, brushing his mind with my question. I've never felt this way. When the Ancient of Days instructed Moses on how to build his temple on earth, it was only a foreshadowing of the real temple that exists in the heavens. Likewise, you are a foreshadowing of the real you that exists in the heavens, and this is a foreshadowing of what will happen if you win this race. This is a foreshadowing of the promise our Master will bring, the body he has prepared for you. I let out a loud roar as pure power shot through my veins. If this was a foreshadowing, I could only imagine what the real event will feel like. But I had no more time to ponder it, because the first wave of blood fiends had descended upon us, and my sword was thirsty for their blood.
The people all stood astounded at what they were seeing. As the drummer played his drum, the 8 warriors single-handedly slayed the droves of blood fiends that descended upon them. They'd all known that the men who guided them were special, but none of them had ever seen them like this. With the fire blazing in his eye and the burning sword in his hand, Melech Black did not just desecrate with the slice of his sweltering blade, but caused pillars of purple flame to rain down from the sky to consume the walking dead that surrounded him and those he was set out to protect. The Gutter King could be seen running towards a horde of blood fiends that raced toward a group of women who clutched their babies in their arms, praying fervently for Yah's protecting hand. He propelled his powerful body in the air, both blades raised high in his hands. All the rage he felt towards the enemy reflected in his gaze, landing dead in the middle of a cluster of nearly 100 who quickly swarmed him. Jessie, who just used a shotgun with a very generous spread to take down a group of 5 fiends, saw what her husband had done and cried out. Why, dear Yah, was he so reckless and crazy, she thought. For a moment, it looked as if they would overpower him. She lifted the shotgun and took out a blood fiend that was coming after one of the Imams that traveled with them. Before her desperate gaze went back towards the swarm her husband had disappeared in, she exhaled a breath of relief as dilapidated limbs came flying from the cluster. She sat with the others in utter awe as he savagely destroyed them all. Her stunned gaze went to her uncle, who fought not too far from her husband. He'd wrapped chains around his fists like gloves and was administering one deadly blow after the other. Each time his mighty fist connected with the face of one of the fiends, it split in 2. It seemed like time came to a stop as she gazed over to see how Hatiti was handling what she was seeing. Like her, she stood in wonderment. Their gazes met, and the question was there in both of their eyes. What has happened to their men? Off in the distance, the sound of a heavy thump began to vibrate the ground. Something big was coming their way. The closer it got, the more the ground shook. The warriors had no time to try and figure it out because the enemy had unleashed the second wave. The faceless soldiers dressed in all black. The bowman stood high in the tree, with the first line of soldiers in his sight. These clones had been designed for one thing: to fight. They had no spirits, empty vessels, little more than machines. But where they and machines differed was that they had organs that their bodies depend on to operate. Abe drew an arrow from the leather sheath he carried on his back, lining it up in the arrow rest and string that was made of no material of this earth. Feeling stronger than he'd ever felt, He drew the string back as far as it would go. Slowly he inhaled. When he exhaled, he let the arrow slide through his fingers. At first, it looked as if nothing was amiss. But then the people watched, stunned, as a line of 100 faceless soldiers dropped dead. Only then did they see the small holes in each of their chests. Each of these 11 men had warriors underneath them that they trusted to serve as another line of defense between the enemy and the people in whom Yah had entrusted in their care. For him, it was Maddox, Lennox, and Wayne. Their swords were covered in blood. Well, all except for Lennox, who never had to draw his sword. Lennox is a very special man. He was aware of what had happened to the 12 warriors when the drummer played his tune. Something very similar always went on with him. No, he had not received his promise. No man had. It wasn't time. But between his brother and his heavenly representative, he'd never had to personally draw blood. For him, it was imperative that he not be made unclean. Why, you ask? Well, so that he could do what he was getting ready to do right now. You see, he knew what the thumping was in the distance. He knew that although the warriors that fought on the front line was very powerful, it was going to take more to defeat the coming threat. A threat that would be aimed solely at one, the white-haired warrior. And so he communicated with his brother in that very special way that they do, to guard his back. And then right there in the heart of the battle, he hit his knees and petitioned the Heavenly Father to help the warrior make it through this final test. None knowing better than Lennox the power of prayer.
I don't know how long the battle went on. All I know is I fought, downing blood fiends, faceless soldiers, and dragon men alike. I love fighting with these Akeem. It reminded me of the days of old, when our dysfunctional family was still together, and we would go on raids destroying the nests of the fallen. The thumping was getting closer. Whatever was coming was big. But there was no fear in my heart. At this moment, I felt like there was no battle I could not win, no enemy I could not defeat. A cheer went up in the air as one of the bowman's arrows took down the last dragon. Swords dripping in blood. We turned, searching for any more that wanted to step to us. There was none. They all lay dead at our feet. I saw that we had lost a few, but I knew that was going to happen. Breathing heavily, I nodded at the warriors who fought so bravely next to me. Good job, I began. But the thumping could no longer be ignored. Whatever it was just beyond the mountain. Something's coming, Noah grumbled, looking in that direction as he raised his sword. And whatever it is, it's big, Bruce gasped, resting his hands on his knees as he too struggled to catch his breath. The battle was never about them, a beer brushed at my mind. It was always about you. Prepare yourself. You must face this final test. And unfortunately, I cannot go with you. Use your spiritual eye.